Hi, I'm Carrie Gold, and I am the supervising attorney of the Justice and Diversity Center Pro Bono Landlord-Tenant Projects. We have a panel today to discuss the topic of habitability in both UD defense as well as in affirmative cases. The panel, our panelists today are Mary Catherine Wiederhold, who is a private practitioner, and next to her is Deepa Varma, a staff attorney at the Eviction Defense Collaborative, and finally, but not least, next to Deepa is Claudio Bluer, who is a private building inspector. We're going to sort of go back and forth between UD defense and affirmatives, and then each of the speakers will to go back and forth in that way.
Housing inspector for City of Oakland for 5 years, and I've been self-employed 21 years doing forensic type inspections. The rental of residential dwellings is a government regulated trade. It has to be done right. It has to be done up to code. And the code in San Francisco is the 2013 San Francisco Housing Code. It's codified. And it's a brief code, very short, and there is what people need to know is most of it is Chapter 10, substandard conditions, and there are about 13 subchapters, and that tells how the owners need to maintain the electrical, the plumbing, the heating. This is congruent with the Civil Code 1941-1. There are also similar sections in the Health and Safety Code. All three branches of government, the executive branch goes by the Housing Code, the legislative goes by the Health and Safety Code, and the judiciary goes by 1941. There are also provisions in the code of the Civil Code of Procedure, and as well as the federal level, the Code of Federal Regulations. They're all very much alike. The properties have to be well maintained. In simplifying matters, despite the number of codes, the different branches of government, different levels, it's very simple. Just maintain the property right. I have this, what I call the maintenance checklist. Anybody can use it. You need to make sure the doors work, they lock, they don't have gaps. The floor has no holes, carpeting, no tears, and the like. Let's see. So I do have also a short list of code requirements per subject matter. And again, the City of San Francisco has housing inspectors that will inspect for code violations. Code violations play an important role, excuse me, on lawful detainers and affirmative actions. Actually, they are the very same issues for both type of cases, that if anybody lives in a dwelling, it has to be well maintained. There is a process also on how to request maintenance, how to notify the owner, the management, the ownership, and time frames for getting repairs done. Some repairs are preemptive. They need to be done before something breaks. Some repairs are on a scheduled basis, like mowing the lawn. Some of it is reactive. So something breaks, it has to be fixed. So you can call the housing inspector. You can call a nonprofit for help. Eventually, you can call a lawyer. how to document these conditions is best to do it, again, by having a city inspector's notice, detailing the defects. The occupant can also document by taking photographs, by filling out a list of code violations, even if they're perceived. We can get documentation from PG&E, for example, diagnosing a heater that is defective. They can have receipts from work that was done that they had to do on an emergency basis, for example. Regular witnesses, or they can call the private inspector or a licensed contractor to inspect and render a professional opinion. The housing code is about maintenance. There are other city codes that are directly related. All the construction codes work concurrently. So we have the building code, the electrical code, the plumbing, etc. Things need to be well built, up to code, and with permits, and then they need to be well maintained. Some of the maintenance require a permit. So not only the work has to be done up to code, but it may well take a construction permit. A number of sections in, again, different codes that help lawyers type their work. And they can quote, again, from the Health and Safety Code. Although they're overlapping, they're not exactly the same. They can call not only the state housing code, the state model housing code, but the city code, as well as 1941, the Code of Civil Procedure. If the occupant is on what is called a Section 8, a voucher, or government-owned housing, there is the Federal Housing Code that is found in Chapter 24 of HUD. And there are other issues that also help type work for lawyers, which is the United States Government Code for lead paint, for asbestos issues. So that helps tackle all the problems in a dwelling from different perspectives, from different codes. And I included some charts, including sections for enforcement, where it mandates the code throughout the state, for example. Issue of notice, constructive notice. From the ownership point of view, the owners should know all that is related to the maintenance trade, okay? If they are renting a dwelling, a building, inside and outside. All the trade publications and professionals advise the owners on having thorough inspections regularly. Although it may not be required, the law may not be totally clear, what have you. They need to maintain their properties well for the value of the property, because it is the law for the occupants. They have to do it. They go into very great detail how to inspect and how to repair. And again, they're fully liable. They're fully responsible for all of it. If they don't know the law, they need to hire somebody who does. They need to hire a licensed property management company. They should have a licensed real estate broker in charge. So they have to be on top of things, maintain absolutely everything, from the floor to the ceiling and everything in between. Inspecting the common areas for code violations that would have a direct impact on the inside of the building, on people living inside, on the dwelling. Specifically the case we worked together with DIPA about rodent burrows, rodent holes on the siding that were clearly points of ingress for vermin. So even a handyman, semi-skilled labor, can tell there are rodents perusing, getting into the structure. So then we should have rodents inside the dwellings. So, and also, in that particular case, it was long-standing. You could tell the holes have been there for a long time. Visuals, having like pictures, having video, and not from cell phones necessarily. It's also interesting the point of repairs after complaining, because I also inspect after the repairs are done. and the repairs are not done professionally, not up to code, not the way it used to be. It doesn't meet the standard of the rest of the dwelling. So it's important to document all that. There are some other issues that are not necessarily visual. Some of the outlets, for example, are not properly wired. They're missing a ground wire, the polarity is reversed. I have a testing device that I plug into an outlet, and it shows that it's not done right. But without the testing device, it looks exactly the same as a perfectly wired outlet. So it's very important to document all that. And also, tenants are responsible for housekeeping. That's just about the only responsibility they have, in my view. In the process of living in a dwelling, some items break accidentally by normal wear and tear, and that's completely different from damage due to intentional damage. And those are big differences. Difference between a compliant and non-compliant, let me rephrase it, between compliance and non-compliance, and legal and non-legal. Sometimes you can have a 100% illegal unit. However, it's 100% code compliant in terms of all basic code requirements. Heat, they can have heat and windows, emergency egress, ceiling height, you name it. But it's illegal. It's not registered, never had a certificate of occupancy. It was not built with a permit, but it's still illegal. There are two hats, so to speak. On the one hand, as a housing inspector, I am a generalist. I cover all aspects of a dwelling. On the other hand, that ties in with an earlier subject that although we have federal law and state law, San Francisco's housing code is very specific on some issues, like heat, for example, or number of occupants per room, depending on the type of occupancy of dwelling. So I can be more of an expert. I can be more to the point of the San Francisco housing code. However, I also work hand in hand with licensed contractors. Yet again, they have the same issues that some are general contractors, some are more specific, HVAC, and some are pest exterminating companies that need to be licensed. So we overlap each other. But I would like to also, one issue is housing code violations. Sometimes they are subjective. That's why we need to have a housing inspector, private or public, look at the problem. Sometimes the defect is trivial, and we agree. Sometimes there is only one, but sometimes we have 20 small code violations, and then we do have a problem, besides Green versus Superior Court. And again, by looking at also why we need to have somebody, a professional, look at the conditions, is because some of them are long-standing, and it takes sometimes a professional to tell how long it took to get to that point, a code violation, whatever it is.
Thank you very much for attending.